Hi, hello, I'm Amy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to go through all of the books that I read in October. The first book that I want to talk about is Together We Rot by Skyla Arndt. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But we follow two main characters, Will and Elwood. We get both of their perspectives. In the beginning of the book, Will is going into the police station to follow up on the investigation of her mother's disappearance. I believe she's been missing for about a year when we start our story, and she's kind of rude to the sheriff, which kind of makes her unlikable to me, along with an interaction that she also has with her best friend's ex-boyfriend in a diner afterwards. She does kind of grow on me throughout the story, but she doesn't really give me a good impression in the beginning. But I do understand where she's coming from. Nobody's really taking her seriously as far as her mother's disappearance. They're trying to say that she ran away and abandoned her family, and Will just doesn't accept that. She doesn't believe her mother would do that. And it's driven a wedge between her and her best friend Elwood because she thinks that his parents had something to do with her mother's disappearance. And they're also in the process of taking over the hotel that her parents own because her dad's essentially checked out. He's turned to alcohol to kind of cope with his wife's disappearance, and he's not really taking care of his responsibilities, and they're going to lose the hotel, and Elwood's parents want to purchase it. But Elwood also discovers through the course of the story that he's not intended to be his father's successor, who is the pastor. I think it's the Children of Adam Church, which seems very culty. And this is in the synopsis, but he finds out that he's not the intended successor, but rather a sacrifice. So he goes to Will for help, and she agrees to help him because she wants his help to discover what happened to her mother. I do enjoy the banter that goes on between Will and Elwood's friends. There are a few scenes that include them, and I really enjoyed that interaction between them. I also really enjoyed the lore of the town that they gradually discover. There is some body horror. There's a scene in a party involving Elwood and something that happens to him that at first seems like it might just be a hallucination because he is drunk. But as the story progresses, you find out that maybe that's not the case, that something kind of gross and weird is actually happening with him too, and that even though he might be able to escape his parents, he might not be able to escape um, the other thing that's happening to him. But if it sounds interesting, I would definitely pick it up and give it a read. I would say I would rate it maybe a 3. It was worth reading once. It wasn't my favorite book of the year for sure, but yeah, that's Together We Rot by Skyla Arndt. The next book I want to talk about is The Fairy Godmother by Mercedes Lackey. This is a retelling, and it's actually a reread for me. I unfortunately didn't like it as much as I remember, but I do still love the magic system. It's very unique. It's called The Tradition, and it's kind of sentient. So it takes people's lives and tries to guide them into fitting with a fairy tale story. And as an example, we follow Elena, who is our main character. She has a stepmother and stepsisters. So technically, she should be a Cinderella, and a prince should come in and rescue her from her stepmother and stepsisters. However, the prince in the kingdom that she lives in, he's only 7. So that's really not going to work out for her. But she's pretty resourceful, and after her stepmother and stepsisters abandon her because they're fleeing their debtors, she goes to a job market to try and get a job as a maid of all work to escape her situation and hopefully find a better life. But nobody's picking her up until the end of the day, where this older woman shows up in a cart, and it turns out that this older woman is a godmother, and it's her fairy godmother. There's several throughout the kingdoms, but many of them are in charge of multiple kingdoms just by themselves. But she offers Elena the opportunity to become a godmother herself because she has this built up magic from not being able to complete her fairy tale. And there are several different scenarios that can happen because of this. She might end up turning into an evil sorceress, or there's a few other things that could happen, but primarily she can either become a grandmother or a grandmother. She can either become a godmother, or the godmother can take her magic from her, um, or she could potentially become an evil sorceress. But for the most part, the first half of the book is Elena accepting this position and training under the godmother, learning how things work, learning more about the tradition and how to try and guide it so that it's less harmful when the fairy tale doesn't have a happy ending and it's undesirable. So there's a lot of world building in this first book. I'm wondering if it's maybe just the first book that is a little disappointing. I'm kind of hoping the rest of the series is a little more exciting, a little more in depth, because they don't have to build the world anymore. But um, about halfway through, Elena takes over the kingdom herself, and one of the first fairy tale situations that she comes across is there are these three princes who are going on a quest. They're from another kingdom, and they're going on a quest to rescue a princess from a tower. And Elena is at the crossroads to meet them and test them. So if they are kind to her and helpful, then she will give them hints and help them on their quest. If not, then she doles out punishments to them, as is the tradition. And one of the princes is a little more offensive than the other two, and she punishes him by turning him into a donkey, I believe, and making him serve her until he learns his lesson. And that kind of sets off a chain of events. And he really is insufferable in the beginning. And I think he would offend a lot of people with the way he talks to Elena and his opinions. And of course, he does gradually learn his lesson. And I would say, I don't want to spoil anything, but the relationship that develops between him and Elena, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more on-page content for that, that we didn't really get to see that develop in a meaningful way. So that was probably the biggest disappointment for me, because I remember enjoying their banter and just kind of the situation that they're in, but there's not as much to it as I remember there being. I did still enjoy the book, though there are other retellings that I enjoy more. I think primarily it's the magic system that makes me like it so much. The writing is still good. It's just, like I said, there's not as much on-page development as I was expecting or remembered. But that is The Fairy Godmother by Mercedes Lackey. Let me did you knock down my microphone? Yes, you did. So now I'm going to hold it. You have anything to add? You want to tell us about the next book? You're just going to boop it? Okay. So the next book I want to talk about is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. In this, we primarily follow four main girls. We have Fern, who's the main character, and then we have Zinnia, Rose, and Holly. They've all been given flower names by Miss Wellwood, who runs the maternity home that they've been sent to because they are underage, unwed mothers. Well, pregnant. Anyway, they're not mothers yet. But we follow them as they're sent to this maternity home where it's expected that they'll stay there until they give birth to their babies, who will then be adopted, and then they will go home and act as if nothing ever happened. What do you think, Mikasa? You seem pretty interested in the book. Are you going to read it? Are you going to tell us about it? No? Okay. Try not to get too distracted. She's very distracting. Sorry about that. Anyway, I would say the home isn't as horrific as I kind of expected it to be, just based on the synopsis. But we follow these four girls as they kind of traverse this place they've been sent to, really without a choice. They weren't really given a choice in the matter. Fern's dad dropped her off and then didn't even say goodbye before he left. There is dietary restrictions, which is pretty much on par with being pregnant. They're not allowed to have salt or sugar, and I guess for the most part, the worst part about that is that they don't really have a choice in the matter. When you're pregnant nowadays, the doctor does give you dietary suggestions, but it's really your choice whether you follow them or not. You're not supposed to eat tuna because there's mercury in it. You're not supposed to have caffeine. You're not supposed to have alcohol. You're supposed to cut down on sugar and salt. But they don't have a choice in the matter. And there is a smoothie situation at one point that I definitely would not be on board with, for sure, personally. Um, and then there's the fact that they get um, clinical visits, I think once a week at the home, and they're uncomfortable and embarrassing, which is also on par with being pregnant, except that for the most part, people try and make it as comfortable for you as possible. These girls weren't even really told what's going on. They were just given the exam, and yeah, it was very uncomfortable for them. So there's that. So when a librarian offers Fern a book on witchcraft, and by the way, she kind of adjusts her baby as far as where it's positioned, that alleviates the issue that she basically pees every 5 minutes. She has to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes, and the librarian helps her with that. So that prompts her to experiment with these spells in this book. They really don't understand a whole lot about it, and they're just kind of playing it by ear, if you will. But their experiments lead them to continue on. And Holly's situation, she's the most she's the character that I'm most sympathetic with. She's the one that I feel sorry the most for, because her situation is definitely the worst out of all of the girls, and a lot of the decisions they make are prompted by their desire to help her. And I would say the witch aspect, the magic aspect, definitely leads to some of the scarier aspects of the book, even more so than what's going on in the home. And I thought it was interesting. I think Grady Hendrix did his best to treat the subject matter with care. I guess one of his family members had been sent to one of these homes, and he took advice from the women around him as he was writing the book. And I would say I'd probably give it like a 3 or a 4. I think it was well written. It wasn't my favorite book of the year for sure. Um, and it definitely has some commentary on the fact that these women were kind of blamed for their situation and accused of being what's all that's wrong in the world, and the men really didn't have any repercussions for the decision that they made together. It takes two to tango. And so it was definitely an interesting read. It was definitely eye-opening as far as I think I'd heard about the homes before, but I didn't really know a whole lot about them. And I think it was worth reading at least once. It's definitely different than the other books that I've read of his. And that is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. Guess I'm just going to hold the microphone because I think you can hear me better. But the last book that I read in October the last book I finished in October was If You Tell by Greg Olson. And I mistakenly thought that this was a fictional thriller when I put it on my TBR for October. I completely forgot that it was a recommendation from a true crime YouTuber that had done a video regarding this story. I will link her video down below. I think she does a great job of telling the story a lot better than I can summarize it for you, I'm sure. But I also think that the author did a really good job of telling an engaging story without dramatizing it. He tried to take care in telling the story. I think he did a lot of interviews for his research, and it's the story of Shelley Nodak and just the hell that she put the people around her in. She didn't even start out as, I mean, she even started out as a problematic child. She would put glass in her siblings' shoes. She accused her father of being inappropriate with her, even though that was disproved by a medical examination. She would start out building these relationships with people, giving them the false impression that she was this kind and loving, beautiful woman that just wanted to help them out and they could help her out. And she was married 3 times. She had a child with each of her husbands. The last husband was a pushover in my mind. He pretty much took her side on everything and believed whatever she said. She pushed him to basically be a workaholic. And so he was kept so busy working and trying to provide for the family that I think he didn't really understand what was going on at the time. But I'm sure there were clues, and some of the things that she had him do, I'm surprised he went along with, honestly. Um, but I guess she was just that manipulative of a person. Um, she was horrific to her daughters. She would come up with scenarios where she could pretty much be the hero. So, like, oh, my kid is sick, but I nursed them back to health. Her oldest daughter even has a story about her waking up to find her mom holding a pillow over her face, and Shelley acted all surprised when she woke up and caught her. She's like, "Oh my God, thank God you're okay." Very strange. I I think most of her motivation was this, that she enjoyed being in control and tormenting people, but she basically caused the death of 4 people. And the only reason she got caught was because her oldest daughter went to the police after she was basically out of her reach, because she wanted to protect her sisters. She wanted her sisters to be rescued from the situation that they were in. Um, but nothing really came of it until the middle sister also left the home and eventually got up the courage to back her sister up with the story and also report her mother to the police. And she basically did it because she wanted to protect her youngest sister. When she found out that her mother was starting the same crap with her that she had with everybody else in their lives, a lot of times she would manipulate them into carrying out the punishments for her for these imagined things that people would do wrong. And to try and stay off her radar, they would go along with it. Um, and it's hard to believe that her victims just kind of did what she told them and weren't able to escape her reach. But you really can't say what you would have done in their shoes. There's no way of knowing unless you're actually in that situation. And it was tragic, and I'm glad that she was caught and incarcerated, and hopefully her girls are living better lives because of it now, that she no longer has any influence over them. It's sad, it's tragic, even though, I mean, it was a fascinating story, but it's just sad to know that she was able to manipulate people the way she did and that it caused people to die. And yeah, it was kind of a hard read, but that was If You Tell by Greg Olson. I really don't feel like I want to give this book a rating. It wasn't poorly written, so if I had to, I would probably say it was a 5, but it's a true story, so it's kind of hard to put a rating on that. And so yeah, that was the thriller, not thriller, true crime documentary that I read last month. Um, but yeah, didn't get as much read in October as I would have liked to, but it wasn't a terrible reading month. I would say my favorite book of them was If You Tell, just because it was the most impactful. Um, I didn't really dislike any of the books that I read, but The Fairy Godmother was probably the most disappointing just because it didn't live up to what I remembered of it. But yeah, if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought. If you haven't read any of them, let me know which ones sound interesting to you. What did you read in October? And if you've gotten this far in the video, leave a book emoji and we can discuss things down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you would like to see more. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And sorry, the cat distracted me. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.